Hey guys and welcome. Today we're going to be back to building our app. So what we're going to be focusing on is this center value, which is the main value for our app. And so I'm going to try and format that with a text I have, and I'm going to place 800 as a dummy value for right now, which is really small in the preview. So the first thing we're going to do is add a .font, .system, and then we're going to specify the size, the weight, and the design of the text. And this is something that I think will look good stylistically right now, but I do want it to be white. So under that, I'm just going to put a .foreground color, color.white. And this looks pretty good, but you will notice that if instead of 800, we have something like 8 million or a very large value, the text kind of just doubles up, and that doesn't really look that good. And so to fix that, we can do a couple things, which we'll start in the next reel. But right now, just before we finish, I do want to add a .ignores safe area on the radial gradient that we made previously, just so we don't have that white at the top and bottom of the iPhone. Happy coding! Welcome back guys to building an app entirely on Reels/Shorts, and today we're going to be tackling the issue where if our central value is too large, it's doubling up and taking up two lines, which doesn't look really good. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a .frame with a width of 300 and a height of 200, and right now the max size of our text is 150, but I'm just making the height of the frame 200 in case we change the size later. And then I'm going to be adding a .minimum scale factor. So what this is basically telling Xcode is that if our text is taking up more space than the frame, then we're willing to scale the size down to times 0.2, or basically 20% of its normally set size. So as you can see, that means that the text just basically becomes smaller instead of doubling up. Now, one thing that will happen still is that if it gets super duper large, it will still start to double up on itself. And to fix this, I will just add a .line limit, which tells Xcode that this text can only take up one line. So even if it does get to a very huge value, which is very unlikely, we'll just have this little ... at the end, which looks a lot more professional than it just taking up another line. Happy coding! Hey guys, and welcome to part 22 of building our app. So today what we're going to focus on is that we're going to make it so that this text that we formatted over the past two reels is a parameter for our view, because we don't want it to be hard-coded like, for example, the color of the text. We want it to be variable. And to do this, I'm going to be using the same format that I did for the background color, where I'm going to be declaring a constant with let. I'm going to be calling it central value, and it's going to be of type int. And as you can see, that's going to lead to an error on our preview because it now expects that this value is given whenever this view is called. And so I'm just going to add a random value to pass into that view. And to use it in our code, what we need to do is add a \parentheses inside our text, because this tells Xcode that we're passing in something to the text view that's not a string, because in this case, like, it's an integer, but we want it to display as a text. And after this, it's going to say that there's an error just because it thinks that there is sometimes, but I'm going to use Control-Shift-K to just clean the build and give it some time, and then after that it'll realize that everything is okay. And as you can see, our view is now going to use the value that we pass in as a parameter for that text. Happy coding! Hey guys, I hope your day is going well. Today what we're going to talk about is this text that we made over the past couple of reels, which uses a parameter to display a central value in our app. And specifically, what I'm going to be focusing on is different previews. So it's always important to realize that users have all different models of devices, and we need our app to work well on all of them. So for example, I'm changing here from an iPhone 14 to an iPhone SE. And as you can see, it does look kind of different. Now, the way it's set up right now, since we're not using like hard-coded frames in most places, it looks pretty much okay. But once we're going to add the name in this view, it's going to look a little different on each device. And so, like, just to be clear, right now what we have is the central value, like the central number in our app setup. But in the next couple of reels, we're going to be adding the name for each screen. And then we're going to use spacers, and that could kind of mess things up on some devices if we're not careful. So be sure to follow along for how we're going to tackle that. Happy coding! Hey guys, and welcome back to building an entire app from scratch. Today we're going to be taking care of the last part of our tab screen, which is the name of the screen. So the first thing I'm going to be adding is a text in my VStack, and I'm going to be using the .font.system modifier to change the size, weight, and design like we did for the central number. I'm also going to be using a .foreground color, and I'm using the color that we're passing in for the background, and I'm specifically using the dark version of it like we did in the radial gradient. So as you'll see, that basically just means that the screen name will come up very subtly near the top, and it won't be too obvious, which is just an aesthetic choice that I'm making. And lastly, I'm going to be adding a padding so that it comes off a bit from the sides and the top. And then we're going to continue formatting this in the next reel. Happy coding! Hey guys, and welcome to part 25 of building our app. Today what we're going to do is make it so that the screen name part looks a bit more clean. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a line limit. And this is going to tell Xcode that this text can only take up one line. And as you can see, it'll go into that ... notation that we've seen before. Also, I'm going to add a minimum scale factor of 0.5. And so after this, if we type in more characters, as you can see, the text size is just going to decrease up until a certain point, which is more than enough for most people's applications. And then after that, it's going to go into that ... still. And once that's done, I do want this name to be kind of near the top of the screen, while I want the number to be near the center. And for that, I'm going to be using a spacer view. So I'm adding one under the name and one under the central number that we have. And a spacer basically takes up as much space as possible while accommodating any other spacers and the views along with it. So as you can see, once I add two of them, they'll both take up an equal amount of space. And we'll continue to clean this up in the next reel. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to making an app entirely on Reels/Shorts. So today we're just going to clean up some of the code that we've written over the past couple of reels. And the first thing I'm doing is increasing the padding on the screen name that I have. And this is just so that it comes a bit more off of the top and sides than it was before. And I'm also adding a .baseline offset on my central value, which is this number in the middle. And I'm choosing a value of 50. And this is just telling our code that we want this value to be about 50 points above where it would be normally. And this is just so that it's a bit more near the center. Also, I'm going to go ahead and change the screen name back to just screen name, not a super long version of it. And I'm adding a comment that we can actually limit how many characters this can be later in our code when we're developing the logic. Also, I'm going to change the preview back to an iPhone 14 Pro. And this is just so that we can make sure that it's looking good on that device as well. And I did have to clean my build a couple of times and give it a few minutes to load. This is very sped up, but once it's done, we can see that it looks great on this device as well. Happy coding! Hey guys, and welcome back to building an app entirely on Reels/Shorts. Today is a pretty big day because we're going to be finishing up our tab screen view. So all we have left to do is extract the screen name to be passed in as a parameter to this view. So we're using the same notation as before with let screen name of type string, and then we're going to get an error in our preview because every time we call this view, we need to supply it with a screen name. For this case, I'm just saying example name is the screen name. And inside our text, we will just replace that screen name with the variable. And once the preview loads, you can see that it is now using the parameter that we're supplying to it. So just a quick recap of what this view does. It takes in three parameters and uses a z-stack with a radial gradient and a v-stack with a text for the screen name and a text for the central value. And in the next reel, we're going to be heading over to the home screen view, and we're also going to be using the view model to develop some of the logic for our app. Happy coding! Hey guys, and welcome back to part 28 of building our app. Today is a huge day because we're going to be putting together a large part of our UI over the next 3 to 4 reels. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a tab view. So a tab view is like what you see when you open the App Store. It's just where you can swipe between multiple screens. And I'm going to be choosing a tab view style of page tab view style and adding a .ignore safe area so that we don't see a tab bar at the bottom and it extends into the entire page. I'm going to be adding a ForEach loop inside the tab view because we're going to be making an array of @state of a custom type, which we made near the start of this journey of TabModel. So what this means basically is that we're going to be looping over this array of TabModel, which has all this data that we can use. And in the next reel, we're going to be filling it with some dummy data so that we can see how the app would look if a user was actually using it with many screens. Happy coding! Hey guys, and welcome back. Today we're going to be adding some dummy data to our @state array that we made last time of TabModel, which is a custom model. And so the first thing I need to do though is for the background color in my model, I'm going to be changing the type from string to background color, the enum that I made in my tab screen. And so this is basically just meaning that we're going to be passing in a case of background color instead of a string with the name of the background color that we want. And this will make our code less error prone, and it's just better practice as well. So after I have that done, I'm going to be adding the dummy data for my app. And so as you can see, there's 3 tab models that I have, and each of them have an ID, a main value, an increment, a name, a background color for each one, and whether or not they should reset on their own at 12 a.m. And once I have this done, I'll be able to use this in my ForEach loop in the next reel so that we can finally get our UI together. Happy coding! Hey guys, and welcome back to building an entire app on Real/Shorts. Today we're going to be using the dummy data that we added last time in our ForEach loop. So the first thing I'm going to add is TabModel array, and then for the ID part, I'm just going to be using \self, and then we have to say tab in. So what tab in means is that basically for each tab model in our array, we can use properties of it in our code. So for instance, what I'm going to be doing for each tab is creating an instance of tab screen, which is the view that we worked over several reels in the past. And so tab screen requires parameters of a background color, a central value, and a screen name. And so we can just use tab.background color, tab.main value, and tab.name to supply in those values. Now, one error we will get is that our model does not conform to hashable. And to do that, we can just go there and make it conform to hashable, and then that error will go away. And then once we're back, all we have to do is clean our build, and then we'll just wait a couple of moments. And then as you can see, our UI is now put together. Happy coding. Hey guys, and welcome back to building an app entirely on Real/Shorts. Today is part 31, and we're going to be just recapping what we've been doing over the past few reels. So for the home screen view, we made an @state array of tab model with 3 tab models inside as dummy data. And then in the body, we have very simple code with a tab view and a for each loop. And the for each loop is basically just looping over this array. And then for each tab model in the array, it's making an instance of tab screen. And if you don't remember tab screen by name, it's basically the view that we made over a lot of reels in the past, and it houses the UI for just one screen. But then what we're doing is we're using that in our for each loop to have a screen for each tab, which you can see in our output. And one thing is that none of this data is being saved anywhere. So if the user were to actually change it in a real app, it wouldn't be saved and it's not usable. But this is mainly a UI structure. And then moving along, we're going to be thinking about how to save and update the data. Happy coding. Hey guys, and welcome back to part 32, making an app entirely from scratch. So if you remember last time, we made some dummy data in our home screen view, but today we're going to be looking into how to make a view model. So in our view model, what we need to do to make it is type in class, the name of the view model, and then observable object. And what observable object tells SwiftUI is that the values in our view model, we want to observe them from our view components and then update the view components every time they change. So like if you've never worked with a view model, what we're going to do is add @published values instead of @state values. And then those are going to be recognized by the view components. And then when they change, the view will update accordingly. And we'll get into more examples of this as we move on. Happy coding. Hey guys, and welcome back to learning about SwiftUI view models. So today what I'm going to do is make an instance of the view model I made last time in my home screen view. So for that, I'm going to be typing in @state object var, the name of the view model in this view, which doesn't have to be the name of the view model itself. So I'm just choosing VM, so that's short. And then the name of the actual view model itself with parentheses to make an instance of it. And then what I'm going to be using this for is, if you remember the dummy data I made in my home screen view a couple of reels back, I'm going to transfer that to my view model. And instead of @state, I'm going to be using @published. And now in my home screen view, it's going to have an error saying that it can't see that data and that it needs it. And to fix that, all we have to do is vm dot, and then it will access that data from the view model. And if I go over to the preview, I did have to clean my build a few times just to get it to work. But after that, as you can see, all the data is being pulled correctly, and it's the same as it was before, but now the data is extracted to our view model. Happy coding. Hey guys, welcome back to part 34. And today what I'm going to do is just take a moment to edit the model that we made near the beginning of our journey. So this is the model. It's called tab model. And what I did here is, although I added all the stuff I needed, I made them all lets. And a let is a constant, and it indicates that this value can't change. Whereas a var means that the value is variable and that it can change over time. And so what I'm going to need to do is, for everything except the ID, I'm going to be needing to make that a var, because those values can change in our app. And so they shouldn't be constants. Also, I'm just going to take a moment, and for the ID, I'm going to be changing it to a UUID string. And this is just a more standard practice, and it's what I'm going to be using going forward. Also, when we need to make an instance of our tab model now, since that ID is just going to be auto-generated, we don't need to give it the ID, and it will just make a unique ID for each instance on its own. Happy coding. How's it going, guys? Today what we're going to do is, for our app, we're going to be adding the functionality that if somebody clicks on the screen, it's going to be adding the specified increment to the main value. And for that, the first step I'm going to do is change my inside of the for each loop to a button. And in the label section, I'm going to be adding the tab screen that I had previously. And this basically means that this is a button, and the look part of the button, or basically the view part of the button, is the tab screen. So because it's the entire screen, if somebody touches anywhere on the screen, the function should execute. And so for the logic, I'm going to be using my view model so that it's all extracted, and we're going to be starting that in the next reel. Happy coding!